All right.
Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Sandy.
What's the point?
I would love to know what you think the point is.
Well, for me, I was asking especially what is the point of highly conceptual art?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I don't know that there is a good answer to that, but let's see what we can come up with one.
Okay, so I think you know that the other day I was up in town, up in London, at the Tate Britain,
Yeah.
seeing the work of Cornelia Parker. There's a fantastic exhibition on at the moment.
Oh, you mean the one I'll get to see this weekend when I come to London?
No, it's shut. It's closed.
Oh,
It's
did it really shut?
yeah.
Just missed it.
Yeah, I just missed it.
All right.
Crazy. Um, anyway, I was thinking about how, maybe like 100 years ago, at like the vanguard of like modern movements in art, there was an emergence of kind of what we would now think of as more kind of conceptual forays into fine art practice, and how over the course of the 20th century, we've seen like a kind of like complete yield into basically like notional art that doesn't have to necessarily occupy like a held space on a canvas or as a piece of what we'd think of as formal or traditional sculpture, and instead can actually occupy really no space sometimes, or indeed can change the way in which we might assume art should be. But I wonder what the point is of all of it, really.
Do you? This is a hot take right now, but do you think for in a lot of times, uh, what we think of as good contemporary art installations comes down to whether how clever something is? How that you see something and you go, oh, that's a neat idea. That to me, as often as not, those are the things that I like, where I go, oh, that is a clever thing to have come up with, and the execution is interesting. More often than not, it's just sort of like, oh, that person has a little light that popped on for a minute and they came up with a novel idea.
Mm.
Is that I mean, it's a superficial way of looking at it, but sometimes I feel like that's what I gravitate towards.
Well, I mean, I do wonder about the relationship between art and artifact, and whether, like, in a museum, we might gather together artifacts of the past. And I've always kind of wondered, and of course, there are many sort of discourses around this, like, what is then the difference between going to the Museum of Anthropology, and seeing like collected artifacts from a wide
Polyglot.
variety of different cultures over centuries, sometimes thousands of years, to popping into Tate Britain and seeing so-called high art that is remarkably similar, at least sometimes physically, to all those artifacts we've just seen in a totally different context. And so, does that mean that context is the only thing that delivers what art is, or that context is the only thing that creates a piece? So, like materiality doesn't make art, does it?
No, and it's a urinal is just a urinal unless somebody signs it and says that it's art, right? That old
Hmm.
classic trope. I
But
mean,
then,
it's hard to tease a lot of that out.
is it enough that somebody declares themselves an artist in order to say that what they have made is art, or what they
I,
intend to make is art? So again, this idea that somebody declares themselves an artist and then the intention is to make art, that the intention and the declaration are the things that qualify whatever the outcome might be.
right, even if they're just making toast with butter, you
Mm,
can claim that that toast with butter is art in a way that my toast with butter this morning was not.
mm,
I mean, it's one of those things where you can come up with other rationales, another way to describe it, but it's not necessarily any better of an answer than the one you just gave, you know? Like, obviously there are holes and there are edge cases that you and I can laugh at and say, well, that means every person who walks down the street can claim they're an artist, and the way they walk is art. And it's like, okay, well then if everything's art, then nothing is, and all those kinds of ideas.
But then
But
we see really kind of vital and important art in which, for example, a young woman does walk or indeed roll along a street.
right.
You know, and
But does that mean everyone who walks or rolls down a street is making art?
no,
You know,
so that
yeah.
point, that pivot point between something being art or not.
I think that line has gotten more difficult to define over time, especially in the 20th century. I think if you ask somebody in 1890 what was art, it would almost be easier to describe than. I think that what we think of as art has intersected regular life in a more arbitrary way in the 20th century, and it blurred that line and made it harder to put down something that has any definitive title to the notion. Are those hanging by strings?
So I have just seen this. This is a detail from 30 Pieces of Silver. And it was in the first room as you entered the Cornelia Parker exhibition. Actually, truly mesmerizing and most beautiful installation. And it is 30 circles like this made up of pieces of silver. So yeah, suspended on, I guess, like a kind of fishing wire or some kind of nylon or something.
Now, what is she trying to say with this?
Well, I think there's again this kind of inquiry into objects and how they disclose themselves.
And how they define the life of the person who owned them.
Not even that. I mean, that might be quite kind of too ordinary almost, although that's possibly the thing that most people would go to when they look at something like this. But this is very much about kind of like physical nature of things, but it's also about our kind of the values we put on symbols and how we interpret or navigate the world through objects. You know, there's lots of stuff in kind of like the poetics of space, even that would present a sense that, you know, an occupied space with objects that are familiar yet at once have become unfamiliar through some kind of transformation, takes us into a realm of otherness that really is kind of akin to magic, or if not magic, even in a much more banal way, simply that we're forced to see with fresh eyes. So 30 Pieces of Silver, well, we can recognize what's there. We can see the fork, for example. We can see the fish knife. But are we seeing them kind of afresh? And that they are suspended, and in fact, it's a shame, I tried to insert into PowerPoint a short like film that I'd taken. One of the most mesmerizing things about this installation is actually when you get right down at ground level, and I was the strange person lying on the floor.
Really, you?
Well, of course, looking underneath, because part of Parker's work, which you'll see in a moment also, is an interplay of the physical and like the shadowland. I mean, that's representative for someone like me, even if it's not the intention of Parker, that I have what is represented and then what is believed. Do you see what I mean? There's also, yes, you know, quite
believed by the viewer, you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, here are these suspended things, and they move, of course. They're suspended on very long wires. They're not static, they're not fixed. They live.
Are they clinking into each other?
They don't make sound. What actually I thought was a really fascinating part of the exhibition is that because of the nature of these things, you can go very, very close to them, though of course you cannot touch them. Right. But around the kind of perimeter on the ceiling, there's a sensor all the way around as a strip. And so if your nose happened to come over what was the demarked line on the floor, a buzzer sounds. And so the whole way through the exhibition, all you could hear is as people, weren't touching and probably didn't even realize they were getting as close as they were to the work. It's a very funny thing, actually, and I'm sure a deliberate thing to have this kind of jolt to kind of remind the audience that they are in fact an audience.
What did you get out of it? What did you read into it?
I think,
or to put it better, what was the point to you?
oh wow, I spent a lot of my time in that exhibition laughing and smiling.
Interesting.
I really did. It was joyous and playful, as much as sometimes very, very serious and very moving. And I don't want to sound totally pretentious and kind of daft, really, but I did laugh out loud at the kind of ingenuity of a lot of what was there. But it does lead me to consider, like, when does the thing become art? When is playfulness something other than a game? When is the physical something other than just a thing?
And why can't, playful be art? You know what I mean? Like why does art have to be serious,
But also, like, when is the idea an art idea? Because surely most ideas are creative, right? They're
sure, by definition.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a shame that
do you think that we art people, for lack of a better term, want to keep art exclusive?
I don't know. I mean, I observed other people in this exhibition, and I'm sure there are many people there far more educated than I about art. But there were also people there who, perhaps my own bias coming through, but who I didn't think were perhaps art people, as you describe them, who were maybe tourists who happened to be in London and wanted to say they'd been to Tate Britain or something. And I saw a lot of people smiling like me, but I also saw a lot of people frowning. And I thought, what are they frowning about?
Confused or angry?
Is it because they're confused?
Yeah.
Or is it because they think that this is how they're supposed to engage with art in a very serious way? And of course, it's not wrong to be serious about art, in the same way it's not right to laugh your head off at the sheer gumption, actually, of some of them.
Well, is there a right or wrong answer to your reaction to art in general?
Well, of course not.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that that's not what everybody might say. I think, somebody who's, totally embedded in a London art scene, who knows a great deal about ultra contemporary art practice, is going to say that, my comments on our little show are preposterous or stupid or banal or
right,
ill-conceived or something. But genuinely, I'm saying, like, how I responded to this. I did spend time reading the blurbs, and I noticed that actually there was a clear sense that Parker had created the accompanying text to make it as accessible as possible. It's very plain speaking, and I relished that. But I also realized that, there then is a sense that you must read in order to understand. And I started to kind of question if that in any way dilutes the power of this being art.
Yeah.
In that, does one simply engage with art through looking, because the visual spectacle is enough to sustain the sense of it being art? Or must one have always some deeper or more intellectualized rationale for what is seen through something that is written or spoken explanation or something?
Yeah.
I mean, I do that in school all the time. Like we have to constantly get our students, especially at higher levels, to make sure that they annotate well, to make sure that they write their essays so that um, there's like an academic sort of so-called standard. But I wonder if that in some way diminishes the point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you can easily, especially with students your age, of the students that you teach, you could easily snuff out what is curiosity and love for by introducing structure over the top. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sorry, I got to have a drink.
No, it's fine. By the way, the show doesn't end until Sunday. I can go.
Of course, you're coming this weekend.
Yeah, I'm coming tomorrow.
Yeah, it finishes on the 16th.
Yeah, so I can maybe try to snap in there on Sunday.
You should. It's absolutely worthwhile.
Jet lag and everything. Okay, I'm gonna, after we get off, I'll go try to get tickets. Yeah, it's funny because like some of these things, like we've used this before. Do you remember which conversation we used this one in?
No, I don't actually.
Like this one is one of those that gives me that wow, that's really clever feeling.
Yeah.
Like I wish I'd come up with this idea feeling. Like it's simple. You think somebody would have done it before, maybe somebody had, but this is a very good way of doing it, you know?
Well, I mean, Rebecca Horn made her exploding piano.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if that was actually, that might have been slightly after this, but very much part of the same stable of art making.
Really neat idea.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And for people who perhaps haven't heard us talking about this before, who don't know what this is, cold dark matter and exploded view is in fact a shed, a garden shed. It kind of meant to represent, I suppose, the detritus of life that we don't really get rid of, that we kind of hoard, but we've got nowhere to put. So we shove it into a shed and we sort of forget about it. And that there's a sense that, I guess, exploding it is moving past it.
Imagine how tedious that is to set up.
Well, I mean, she did actually, you know, the team that worked with her, I think it was an army team actually. She worked with.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to. In some ways, though, that for me, what really gets this is the idea of sticking the light in the middle so that you get the light effect as well. You know?
Yeah, I mean, this is the neat part of it, because the whole thing, again, this idea of stuff that's alive in art, you know, there's a sense that this actually has its own life, so much as it's the moment entirely suspended. And the intention is that the exploded view is the view a fraction of a second after the detonation of the shed, then meticulously kind of revitalized, revisited, is that you actually feel that, again, as with the first thing we looked at, you know, each of these pieces kind of moves a bit. And with the presence of the audience as well, the audience create their own shadows and they're moving. And it's quite a beautiful thing, actually. It's odd.
And even though it's interesting because it's kinetic despite being relatively static.
Yeah. I mean, perpetual canon I've not included is squashed flat brass instruments suspended in a circle, again with a single light source that then illuminates them. And you really do feel as if it's like a cacophony of sound. You can't hear anything. But the presence of the movement, because of the way that the light operates, the shadows are cast, and these what then become kind of bizarre, yet strangely familiar objects, is mesmerizing. It's exciting. It's funny.
It also shows how much your brain has to do with. I mean, these things are not making sound. They're crushed in that case, right? So it's like they couldn't make sound even if they wanted to. And yet, because having all those instruments in one space, to our brain says, when I'm in a space with this many instruments, usually sound is being made. Your brain expects the sound and almost creates it even if it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like being in the sort of like the Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia or something.
Sure.
Um, I know this is an interesting thing about like the point of art more broadly, perhaps, is that, you know, we traditionally have relied on like monosensory experience. Whereas I think art now, or in the last like 30, 40 years, has tried to really like push us. Oh, I mean, you could argue even like, you know, Kandinsky obviously was making paintings that were supposed to be sound, or we've got lots of evidence of like the sound I see through
Sure.
even even in standard what I think of as documentary photographic practice, the record of people playing instruments and so on. But there's something about combining the familiar with the suspension, with the shadow, with that fluid but subtle sense of movement. It really does play into one having almost like an auditory hallucination, like hallucination, or it triggers your imagination. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe, you know, I wonder if, and you got to assume that people who made these things imagined all of these things were potentials, but maybe some of them they didn't think of. You know what I'm saying? I was listening to something the other day, and it was actually the Stuff You Should Know podcast. You ever listen to that one? It's these two American guys, and they'll choose a topic and they'll like discuss it. They'll talk about it for the thing. Anyway, one of the episodes, the guy said, you know, whenever I meet younger people, they're always trying to, if they're writing something or working on some art, they're always trying to like put all this meaning and different angles of analysis into their work. And when the reality is that if you just write it as you wanted to write it, the users will do the job of putting the meaning into it. You know what I mean? That you don't need to, that if you write something and it's good, it's going to inherently have all kinds of meaning that could be read into. That it's not necessary for you to consciously put that in there every time. I really wish they had moved like 6 inches to the right when they took this photograph.
Why is that?
Just slightly off symmetrical. I like symmetry.
The point of this, of
Could you
course,
have done this, by the way? Could you have slept in a box?
I can sleep anywhere. Not for long is the problem in my life, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I've always found it quite contentious that I've always thought of this as a Cornelia Parker piece.
Right.
But really, I mean, Tilda Swinton stakes her claim as the sort of the driver, the conceiver.
She actually says so. Okay.
So I mean, this is at the Serpentine Gallery in London, and Tilda Swinton, the actress, slept inside the box, and the audience came in. You could walk around, you could look at, she's, you know, really in there, really asleep. And so many times I'm asked by students actually when I show this, but what's the point of this?
Yeah.
Now, isn't it?
And would it be the same if it wasn't a famous person in the box?
Well, the thing that's always fascinated me is that when people ask what's the point, is I don't really know what the point is, but I know that I absolutely love it. And that seems like
Well,
such
this
a
is right
word.
up your alley.
Pardon?
This is right up your alley.
It is, but I actually can't articulate what it is about it that I find so absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to look at a painting of a sleeper, in that, you know, we've looked together at Helga and Daydream, and, you know, it's got that kind of hazy quality.
This is different.
This is this is not a painting of someone sleeping.
Yeah, this is like dead weight, something living shut down for a little while. It's different.
But I
Do you
mean,
think there, I mean, Go ahead.
Well, there's all kinds of notions to do with, voyeurism. Like,
Sure.
are we invading what's happening to us as if we watch our thoughts when we experience this work? But at the same time, simply in the presence of it, there is enormous beauty. And that seems, again, it seems too simple and rather boring just to say that. But it's almost as if the entire point of this was for my engagement with it at that moment, in which I found it so totally beautiful. Like, that's the point. Nothing about a high-minded engagement with like an intellectual discourse around someone sleeping in a box that happens to be a celebrity who none of that. The point is that for some reason it just seemed to resonate.
I think it wouldn't have resonated if it wasn't Tilda Swinton in the box.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't think it would have nearly the legs that it did.
Well,
plus she's weird looking. You get that in there.
Well, I mean, you might think so. She probably thinks you're weird looking.
No. I mean that she's striking in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like she's got a. I think she would agree that she's a little weird looking. I think that like part of it is, I think if it was, if it was me sleeping in that box, I don't think this would be a famous piece of art.
Oh, come on. I'd see it.
You'd show up just to laugh at me.
I'd be there.
You'd be like, wake up, Wadman. We've got a show to do.
I'm bored, Bill. Hurry up.
Yeah, you love it. So you love this, but you really can't describe why you like it.
No, and then that's so fascinating for me because
should you have to?
But no, but my entire life, Bill, is about justifying art. Both.
Yeah, I know. I can tell.
But it is, that's my work.
I know.
So sometimes when I encounter the things I truly love, like really love, and I have no words for it. What's that about? Does that diminish all that art that I can justify? Or does it make me a silly fool?
I was talking to somebody yesterday about kissing.
Mm.
And I said, does everyone in the world think that they're a good kisser? Probably so.
We've had this conversation before.
Well, yeah. But at the end of it, I said, the person said, yeah, some people are like too sloppy. And I said, yeah, and some people are too timid. I said, but either way, having a really good kiss needs to take your breath away. And I think that to some extent, if this art is taking your breath away, your mental breath away, then that just means it's more successful than the stuff you can't explain.
Okay, first of all, I think, answers in the comment. If you've ever kissed Bill Wadman,
come on, bring it out.
Please make a comment below, or indeed either one of us. If you've kissed either one of us at some point in your life,
yeah, don't put me on the spot.
Give us a
review, 1 to 5. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think that there's something to the idea if something really hits you and it kind of, I mean, there's lots of music that I can't describe why I love it. I can go see, Calling of St. Matthew, even Caravaggio. So I can see that kind of stuff. And I can explain all kinds of technical reasons why I love it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually really explain why I love it.
Well,
why do I love that Sargent painting? I don't know. There's just something about it. I can give you all kinds of good reasons, but that's not really the reason.
So the point of the question today about the point is there a point to any of this? Is the point that I find something beautiful in terms of how I consume and appreciate art? Is the point only realized for me as a viewer when I do feel like a deep and inarticulable connection to the work. And
isn't that enough?
well, I know, but that makes me feel quite uneasy because then I think I can justify so much art.
That's the problem.
Hmm.
And that gets us back to where you draw the line in the first place. The separation between life and art. It can't just be intent. Because intent can be faked.
I think that's rather a neat little parcel of a show there, Bill.
Not bad. It's almost like we're getting good at this.
I'll see you in London.
All right. We'll see you in a couple of days.